here we are. Here we are. So here's the thing, and you've read the title, which is why you probably clicked on the video. You know I'm going to talk about books that I'll never stop recommending. I have very specific books in here, okay? There's very specific kind of people who want to read some of these books. And that is acceptable, and okay. So here are the books that I will never stop recommending to people, depending on their reading taste. Some of them I think that every single person on this planet should read, and some of them will depend on what you like to read themselves. There are a few on this list, so I'm trying not to go into too many, like, to talk about things too long, because otherwise we'll be here all day. And I don't want to do that. I'm doing short, sharp videos now, people, because that's all the time that I've got. So let's just get straight into it, shall we? The first one is AD 30 by Ted Dekker. I love this book. I think everybody should read it. It is part Arabian adventure and part, you know, Jesus just impacting your life forever and ever, and you're changed as a human being. It's amazing. As an outsider coming in to see who Jesus is, I love this book. This is a phenomenal story. Like I said, we are half Arabian princess story, and then it's just phenomenal. It is so beautiful. Ted Dekker is one of my favorite authors. I have two favorite authors. He is one. He does a masterful job at these kind of books. I will say AD 33, not recommended, because basically undid all of the hard work he put into in AD 30 and then told the same story, which I did not appreciate. But AD 30, 1,000,000% I would always recommend. I will never stop recommending this book, and if you want your heart to be touched and your soul to be touched, this one's the one. Okay, the next book, Rochelle Dekker, The Choosing. This is Ted's daughter, Rochelle, and honestly, this book I would recommend every single female on the planet to read. Like guys too, like not excluded, but to every single female, I would recommend that this book you read, because this is essentially set in a dystopian world where women are only valued if they are picked to be married, and if they are not picked to be married, then they are automatically seen as the absolute lowest of society. I know this sounds bad, but just hold with me. And so they are basically looked at as like the lint, like that you pick off of your clothes. Like that, they literally call it. Like they are absolute nothingnesses if they don't get chosen to get married. And one girl who was absolutely a shoo-in, like everybody's like, there's no way you're not getting picked, does not get picked. And she can't understand why, and nobody can really understand why. And so then she tries to go into this new life of being like invisible. Nobody will make eye contact. You can't contact your family anymore. You are seen as basically nothing. And she goes through and tries to reconcile herself with this life. But then also there is this mysterious guy who is talking about the fact that people are valued just because they are people rather than what they can do in society. And it's kind of interesting, but it's also blasphemy. And the council, the people who are in charge, will absolutely not let that voice be heard, and so it's dangerous to even try and listen to that person. But he's holding a message that you are valued because you are a person and you were created, and that's why you have value. And so if you struggle with self-esteem, or if this is like, honestly, I would recommend every single female on this planet read this book. Like men too. The second book sort of goes, it's a series, the second book in this series sort of goes a little more into the guy side, into the guy POV, and that was kind of interesting. And so, but this just absolutely phenomenal. I would always recommend this, particularly to women, to read all the time, forever. It's so good. The next book that I would recommend, and I will not stop recommending, is The Last Christian by David Gregory. Now, here's the thing. Okay, so like it sounds like, you know, it might not be up your alley, but dude, this literally is looking at the concept of if you can live forever, and what would that look like? If you could get an artificial way to live forever, can we do that? And if we can, how would that actually look? Because we are mind, body, spirit, right? And so how would it look if that was the case? And if you could actually live forever, what would that look like? And at the same time, it does also look at what would society look like when you are zero allowed, like nobody is allowed to even talk about the Christian faith or God, anything like that, because it's exclusive. Like there's only one God in that religion, whereas other religions talk about multiple options. And so they're allowed to continue, but not Christians. And so this girl who's been in a missionary jungle, basically raised there her whole life, comes into the society where they're literally about to start being possible to live forever in these artificial ways, but then also be shocked that nobody is a Christian, or nobody's allowed to speak about being a Christian if they are secretly one. And it's so fascinating. The juggle of these two ideas and themes was so good. And I will also say very intellectual. So if you are not intellectual with science, and it's sort of science fiction, it's very intellectual. And so if that's not for you, then this book might not work for you. I wouldn't recommend this book to someone who's just a casual reader who doesn't really like to get into some of these deeper topics and themes. But if you do, absolutely recommend this book. I loved this. I thought it was really good, and it really tackled some of these themes and topics in a really, really good way, and really made you walk away and think. So that was really fantastic. I will always recommend that to people who are good readers and who, you know, like that kind of stuff. Okay, The Secret Life of Sarah Hollenbeck by Bethany Turner. This is the first Bethany Turner that I read. She's my second favorite author. She writes romance. She used to write Christian romance. Now it's just sort of hovering in the romance category. I wouldn't put her under Christian anymore, because she doesn't really talk about God in her books anymore. But she started doing that, and I loved that so much. I still love her books, but they're just different. And so this one, The Secret Life of Sarah Hollenbeck, you are following Sarah Hollenbeck, who has been a spicy writer, a spicy romance writer, and then finds God and decides, I don't want to write that stuff anymore because I don't think that honors God, but then goes to this new church. She has just announced that she is the pen name of this very wildly popular series, and so she goes to this new church, and she's hoping nobody from that church, you know, realizes that that's who she is, because she doesn't want people to know, and she'd rather write something else. And so she's been through this divorce, and she meets the pastor of this church, who's young and, like, you know, super attractive. They've got this attraction thing going. They quite like each other, you know. He's like single, so it's fine, but, like, you know, they like each other quite a bit. And so it takes a very serious, very realistic look at, we have very strong physical connection to each other, but we both agree we don't want to cross that boundary until we get married. So what does that actually look like? And rather than saying, oh, it's easy, no, it's not. And what does it really look like when you're trying, but then it's really difficult in that space? And so there's a lot of elements in this book that we talk about and we go through, realistic Christian living people, not just like this caricature of a Christian who's like, oh no, I never had any problems with this in my entire life. Babes, you're lying. That's like being human. So there's no way. So it's just, it looks different for everybody else. For everybody, it looks different for everyone. So it looked at some of these really serious topics in such a good way, and friggin' hilarious. I fell off of my chair multiple times because I was laughing so hard I could barely breathe. This book is so funny. It's so funny. Love this book a lot. I will always recommend this book for someone who likes romance, because it was just so fun. Next one is The Hadley Academy for the Improbably Gifted by Connor Grennan. I love this book. I wish he did more. Honestly, it could easily be a series, but I don't think he hasn't come out with any more. Essentially, a teenager realizes he has superpower type situations, and he can see into the spiritual realm, and he is basically recruited to be able to hunt down these scary spiritual demonic things, and use his abilities to be able to fight them off. And it was really fun and really just engaging. Yes, he's a teenager, so it's sort of like YA, but it was really great. As an adult, I had no problem reading it. It was fantastic. Next one, Project Hail Mary by Andy, where Andy is the king of being able to make science fiction palatable for literally everybody. You don't need a science degree to understand his books, and Project Hail Mary was so good. I actually have it right over there, and then The Martian is right there as well. I read Project Hail Mary first on a recommendation from Twitter, and it was one of the best things I ever read. I love this book so very much. It was really good, lost in space sort of a situation. I absolutely loved it. It was so much fun, and you've got to try and save the human race from this mysterious thing by being in space, but waking up with amnesia in space. So good. Loved it. So much fun. Next one is The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. Honestly, octogenarians who solve crimes was just the best idea. I love it so much. But then again, I like Murder, She Wrote, so she's not an octogenarian necessarily in that show, but I'm like, I don't know. It's so much fun. It did have that feel to it. It was like a Murder, She Wrote kind of a vibe. I like it. It's really funny and really interesting, and, the mystery is great. So I will always recommend that for people who like, something like that, something a little different. The next one, also a crime wreck, is Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson. This is such a funny series. There are currently 2.5. I'm going to count the smaller Christmas one as a half book. But there are a few in the series, and we basically follow, there's a murder, but this is hilarious because his family is like, everyone in his family has killed someone at some point, and he goes through the story of this current day murder, but then also bringing in, like, how the people in their life killed someone as they went along. And it's not necessarily everyone was like murder, like some people like accidental, like whatever. And it's just so funny. I really enjoyed this book. It is hilarious. It is so self-aware, and it breaks the fourth wall. Is so good. I didn't understand how you could break a fourth wall as a book, but it is so well done. It's hilarious. So much fun for no crime book deserves to be this funny. I love it. The next one is Snapshot by Brandon Sanderson. Don't worry, there's only a couple left. This is a novella. So if you want a short introduction into Brandon Sanderson, this is probably a good one to read. It is a little harder to find sometimes, but this is a really good story. And it sort of is a dystopian, I feel. So you're looking into the future where there's technology is a little bit different, and you can literally walk into this big giant space where a snapshot of literally the living, breathing people you can go into, and basically go into this snapshot and walk through there. The people are interacting, people are just doing what they were doing in the last 24 hours or whatever it was. And these two detectives go in to sort of help the real cops figure out who did stuff and the criminals and where they could find evidence and what really happened. So it is a great book. It is short and sweet, so that is always fun. There you go. Love that one. Great introduction to Brandon if you don't want to commit to one of his bigger books. So, Counted with the Stars is the last one by Conolyn Kazette. It is essentially the story of an Egyptian girl who is around in the time of the plagues in Egypt. So that's fun. So you get to experience that not from the side of one of the Jewish people, but one of the side of the Egyptian people. She is an Egyptian slave, so not just Hebrew slaves, but Egyptian. And so she looks at that from that perspective, and then what happens after that as well. And it's a good book. I like it. It is really fun. It touches your heart in a different way. It helps you to see and imagine that time and that story in a different way, and more involved. You feel more involved and more invested in that story and in what happened in that space from an outside perspective, because sometimes, seeing it from an outsider's perspective can be really helpful, especially if you are a Christian and you do believe that now everybody and anybody is invited into the family of God. And so it's just I love this book. It was so fun to see this story unfold in a completely different way than I had ever considered before. And honestly, I don't find these books to be particularly heretical. I just think it's an interesting way to bring about, this story from the Bible to be alive in a different way. So I appreciated it. I really enjoyed it, and I would recommend it for people, particularly people who like historical fiction, because, it's great. Cool. Well, those are the books that I will never stop recommending. I love those books so much, and I think that people should definitely read them, and I will continue to recommend them to anybody, depending on what their reading taste is. Thank you so much for watching. If you're still here, oh my gosh, you're amazing. And also subscribe, like, blah, blah, blah. See you in the adventures.